powerful wisdom to fight racism. So get ready for this. For those who don't know him yet, he's an author of a book called Uplift Yourself, Change the World, which I'd recommend. I've read it, and it's an amazing book. When you read it, you want to read it again and again. He's a life coach, motivational speaker, meditation, Krishna Bhakti teacher, and a musician. It's phenomenal how one person can be so many things and remain so much down to earth and approachable. One of his main goals is to help people to the best versions of themselves. He bases his teachings on deep understanding and practice of the sacred teachings of both the East and the West. So today's topic, powerful wisdom to fight racism. We all know that after so many years of efforts across the world, the problem is so much still very prominent. So will we ever be able to eliminate this challenge? Today we want to discuss this issue from the spiritual perspective, as wisdom, knowledge of the East emphatically states that it is almost impossible to resolve the problem of racism without addressing it on the spiritual platform. So we'd like to pass you over now to Mahatma to say a few words on this topic. During the course of the talk, if you have any questions or comments, then please just put them through on the feed, and then I can relate to them after.
While I'm speaking, please ask questions.
Okay. Are we actually live? It's still looking blank on mine. Yeah, Raghunath?
Yes, we are live, yes.
Okay, oh yeah, I can see, okay.
So you can, welcome everyone. Nice to see you, although I can only see you in my mind.
Yeah, Raghunath?
Yes, we are live, yes.
Okay, oh yeah, I can see, okay.
So welcome everyone. And Hoxaja was saying, ask questions. I like questions. I like to get questions while I'm talking. I don't feel it's an interruption, but I think it adds to the conversation. It's more personal and more interactive. So whatever's on your mind, you can ask, or questions about what I'm speaking. And I like questions because it's relevant to what you're thinking. I just wanted to finish reading the description. We have a description here. And you read the first two sentences, or first sentence. And I like this description. The most fundamental teaching of yoga wisdom is that we are not this body. We are spiritual beings that are within the body. No matter what the color of the body, it has exactly the same spirit soul that gives the life to the body. It also has the same biology. Different colors. I was just, I just saw something before class. I don't know if you've seen this. This lady has a color chart, like you know, like in a paint store, you have a color wheel. So she has a color chart in different squares with different colors. And they're all basically brown, tan, and dark tan, middle tan, light tan. But they're all colors of people. They're pictures of people. And around the people, it's shaded their color. So she was showing how, like, if you look at the human race, you'll see it's like a color wheel of various colors, which obviously has nothing to do with the person inside. As we said, biologically, they're the same. Spiritually, it's the same soul. So it's interesting, and you may have heard of this story where the teacher said, if you have blue eyes, go to the back. If you have brown eyes, come to the front. And then that day, she said, the reason that the people with brown eyes are coming to the front is because people with brown eyes are smarter and better in every way than people with blue eyes. So, of course, she wasn't serious. She made it sound like this is true. And she wanted to see what the students would do. And she knew what the students would do. The ones with brown eyes started mistreating the ones with blue eyes. So what she did the next day was even more interesting. She said, oh, I made a mistake. It's actually the people with blue eyes are more intelligent, capable, and so forth than the people with brown. So the brown have to go in the back. And then the blue, guess what the blue did? Well, if they more spiritually evolved, they would have been more compassionate, but no, that's not what happened. They did what the brown-eyed people did to them yesterday. And so maybe you've heard of mock experiments done in universities where they would give certain people power. And it's just a mock experiment. You play the jail guard, you play the prisoner. Have you heard of any of you heard of these experiments? It's quite interesting. And because it's totally mock, it's nothing real, it's just we want you. And the prison guards would always mistreat the prisoners. And it didn't matter. So if you shifted roles from now you're no longer a prisoner, you're a prison guard, you would mistreat in some way. Little bit, control, manipulate, take something for yourself, take advantage of someone. And there are many experiments, other experiments like that. Maybe you know this experiment when people were asked to press a buzzer that would cause pain to another person. And every time the person answered the question wrong, they would have to press a buzzer. And the person would scream, "This is too painful, don't press the buzzer." The person was an actor, there was no pain. But most of the people, even though this person was asking, "Please don't press the buzzer," the volunteers who were doing the experiment, they would press the buzzer because they were told to do so by an authority. It's an interesting experiment. And what they found is that, the power of authority, that people will blindly follow authority. And oftentimes authorities, you're not bad, but the authority is bad, and then you do something bad because the authority has the power. So there's this problem in this world with power. You know the saying, power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. So this is a reality. Let me just finish reading this. Just theoretical understanding is not sufficient. We also need and can come to a practical realization of this through meditation. Bhagavad Gita explains that when we reach this platform, our fight against racism becomes sustainable, as we can see everyone equally beyond the external covering of the body. So what I thought would be interesting for us to do is to look at our own racism, because when you look at the world and you see problems, at least this is the way I've learned to see. When you look at the world and see problems, I think the most effective thing we can do first, or one of the most effective things, is reflect back, am I contributing to that problem? Because I'm looking at the problem and I don't like it. All right, I don't like the problem, but is there any way I'm contributing? And sometimes we are contributing and we don't recognize it. And so I would like to do in this class, or encourage you to do some self-reflection on your own prejudice and racism. And I think a lot of people don't want to be racist. I think a lot of us feel we're not racist. We look at prejudice and so forth. And it's appalling, it's disgusting. But when we look at our social conditioning, if we're honest, if we look at our social conditioning, for many of us, we've been socially conditioned to not like certain people or to think of certain races as inferior. When I was young, I'm an American, excuse me. So Americans were very fearful of Russians. We were always fearful that the Russians would bomb Americans. So the Cold War meant, at least we felt, or we were trained to think this way, that at any time a war could break out between ourselves and Russia. So when we were young, I would say every month in school, an alarm would go off. And when the alarm would go off, I don't know if, did you ever do this for you, Raghunath? Alarm would go off and you'd have, this was grammar school, I guess.
Yes.
Even, this might have also been through, it never happened in university, but maybe all the way up through university. This alarm would go off and you'd have to go under your desk. There was room to go under your desk and just stay there. You did that also at Hokusiju? So this was So why were we doing this? And they'd say, well, in case the Russians drop a bomb. All right, so how am I supposed to grow up with a good feeling about Russians if I'm growing up thinking they're the ones who could kill me? So I like Russians. I have many Russian friends. I'm a spiritual master. I have disciples who are Russian. But as a kid, this fear was implanted. The Russians are bad, Russians are, or during World War II, then it's Germans. I'm Jewish, so Germans. So how can you escape this? Even today, you know, what happened to that 6 million Jews is difficult for Jewish people to get over. So I think it's natural. I was raised in my neighborhood. My neighborhood was all white. And there was a black neighborhood, but it was probably about 3 miles from my neighborhood. That's where the black people were living, about 3 miles, and then further away also. But in my neighborhood, there were no black people. In my high school, I don't remember. I remember maybe an odd 1 or 2, but and none close friends. So growing up in high school, I had no friends who were African American, so I had no interaction. And so naturally, it has some effect on you. The black people had a harder time in America, at least then, much harder than they have now. Many have a hard time, but opportunities were even less. That means less education. That means the jobs they got were less. So then you know, you start thinking, oh, well, they must be less because I go to the store and all the hard labor jobs are the black people. So it's hard to avoid prejudice because it's programmed in you. And I once gave a workshop on forgiveness, and it was outside of Bhaktivedanta Manor, which is outside of London. And we rented a room in a convent. And so when we met the head, what do you call her? Mother Superior, the head Mother Superior, and she said, what are you talking about? I said, forgiveness. And she said, oh. And I said, resentment. She said, oh, resentment is. He said, resentment, generational. It's handed down. You know, it's like, I don't like you. Why don't I like you? Because my father didn't like you, and I grew up hearing him talk about how bad you were. So it's a reality, right? We may have resentment for someone or some race of people we never met. When we were kids, we joke when we play, you don't do this, but boys are very rough, and we wrestle and fight. And somehow or other, we would play games, and like we'd always play war, and we'd have our guns. And then we'd like arrest somebody, and we would torture them. And then we would always say Chinese torture. Did you ever do that, Oxygen? Chinese, this is like this whole concept of torture is done by Chinese people. You know, in our own backyard, people are being tortured, right? Anyway, so, you know, you grow up, I'm just making the point. I'm not making a judgment on anyone of how this affected us, but the point is it got in there. Now, look at it now, look at modern media. Who do you see in modern media? Who advertises the products? Old people? No. Overweight people? No. Unattractive people? No. It's always younger, slimmer, or muscular, more attractive, isn't it? So it sends a message. If you're overweight, you may not be overweight, but society says you're overweight. You might be the perfect weight for your body type. But if you're not as thin as others, as the media says you should be, or portrays what is beauty, then a person who weighs more over this threshold of what's beautiful is called fat or called ugly. Although in the late 1800s, to be bigger was considered more beautiful because poor people were thinner because they couldn't afford to eat as richly and as much as wealthy people. Also, did you know that? And there were actually herbs to help you become more plump because it was considered attractive. It's a sign of wealth because you could afford rich food, and you were not a laborer. You were not in the fields working because that will keep you thin. And if your skin were dark, if you're a white person and your skin were dark, that was also considered lower class because the white people who had the darkest skin were the laborers who worked outside on farms and other labor because they got the most sun, so they got suntan. So if you had suntan, you were considered like a laborer, lower class, maybe uneducated. Did you know that? Isn't that interesting? Then what happened, one woman, who I think, I forgot her name, maybe a French woman, one of these brands of makeup or cosmetics, some form of cosmetics, she went on a boat cruise somewhere, which of course is what you can do if you're wealthy. And she was out in the sun a lot and she got this beautiful suntan. And then all of a sudden, suntan became a sign of beauty. Isn't that interesting? So no longer was it a sign of the laborer class or the people who were poor. It was a sign of, oh, you could afford the time to sit in the sun and the sun is beautiful. And then from that point, the suntan has been considered nice. And I lived in Mauritius for a while, and a lot of the French and English people come there, especially in the winter because it's the southern hemisphere. And so your winter is their summer. And it gets very hot and very humid. And so the people who are coming, like if you're coming from Scotland in January and you go to Mauritius, what do? You want to sit on the beach and soak up the rays, isn't it? Because you probably haven't seen the sun in a while, at least a sun that's warm, that is that warm. And so the white people come and they sit in the sun to get tan. And the Indian people go to the store to buy cream to make their skin lighter, because lighter skin amongst darker skinned people is considered more beautiful. And amongst whiter people, if they get a nice tan, it's considered more beautiful. So my point is that all of us, whether we're conscious of this or not, this is being fed into us. What is beautiful, what is good, what is better, what is smarter, isn't it? And you get it from an early age. So I think if we're all honest, we'll see that racism was programmed into us. So I was, how you react to it, how you believe it or buy into it, or what you do with it is another thing. And if you were fortunate enough, probably if you were born as a minority in a poorer family, you probably have much less racism than you do if you're born in a wealthier, more educated environment. That's just general. When I was younger, I would distribute books of my spiritual master, and we would go to people's homes. We'd distribute Bhagavad Gita and other books. And I used to love to go into the African American neighborhoods, because at that time we were dressed as monks. And when you're dressed as a monk, at least in those days, like the 70s, in America, it was not considered cool. Now it's kind of considered cool. You have a lot of Buddhist monks and people, Facebook pages, urban monk and this and that. And, I think I'll be a monk for 2 years. That's kind of cool, shave my head and sleep on the floor and, meditate. But in those days, I got to experience what it was like to be discriminated against, because I was actually run out of town sometimes by the police. I was arrested at least 5 times. And, we would walk around in our robes and, people would call the police on us. But what I liked about going into these African American neighborhoods is that because they had been discriminated against for so many generations in America, they were the most open and non-judgmental of anyone that we spoke to. They were, because they'd been through it. And the higher we went up in society, the tendency was there was more pride, more sense of I'm better. And then if you would go to campuses like Ivy League campuses, there's where you would find people who thought they were God's gift to the universe. Not all of them, obviously, but obviously they were raised in families, wealthy families there, or they were very intelligent, or both. And so that's the reality. So I just wanted to make a confession to you in just to kind of maybe help you open up so you could make a confession also, or at least confess to yourself. So my neighborhood was like upper middle class Los Angeles, very close to Beverly Hills. It was actually the next suburb next to Beverly Hills. It's called Beverly Wood, and then there's Beverly Hills. So from my house, if you drive, okay, it's about a 5-minute drive to Beverly Hills. I would go there with my parents a lot. So, and it was all Jewish. It was all wealthy, all white. And like I said, I had no friends that were not white. I had no friends that were not Jewish. Actually, one non-Jewish person lived on our street. That was like, whoa, who let him there? How did he get there? You know, it's like, you're not supposed to sell your house to a non-Jewish person or non-Black person. And the only Mexicans and other non-white Jewish people that I knew were just the people who would come to our house to do the gardening, to clean the house, and so on. So we had one maid, African-American maid. She'd come every week and clean the house. And then she'd go home because there was a curfew at 6 o'clock. She had to be out of the neighborhood. This is like the 1950s. I don't know if you know this, but still in the 1950s, there was segregation in some parts of America, and there was a curfew. So I grew up like that. That was just like, when you grow up, it's just normal. That's what I saw. So it did have an effect to some degree. I can say that in all being as honest as I can be. Just not being with people, it has an effect. And then when you get to know them and you meet them, it starts to break down your prejudice. But a lot of people, they don't meet the other racial groups. They remain in their own group, and they retain their conceptions and ideas, which are usually false, crazy, made up, or the media, this or that. And I've lived in South Africa. I lived in England. I've been to France. I've been to Italy. Actually, I've been maybe 16, 17 countries. No, I must have been more. But I've lived in India, and one of the things that I find about people is how different they are culturally, but how they are the same as individual persons. That's what I continually find wherever I go, that as individuals, we all want to be happy, we all want to live, isn't it? And we enjoy eating, we enjoy friendship, we enjoy joking, we enjoy, like on that level, everybody is practically the same. We all like music or art, or it's just the way it's manifested through the culture. And so what I found is, if you go somewhere into another culture, then you see how people do things differently. And your first thought is, that's strange. And strange only means that it's not the way you do it. It's not the way you were raised to do it. But the word strange, the connotation is something's wrong with that because it's strange, isn't it? You don't do it the way I do it, it's strange. But the connotation of strange often is it's wrong, or it's lesser, or it's not right. It's not the way to do it. You ever think like that? Someone's doing something, you think, it's not the way to do it. Maybe it's a better way. Maybe it's just another way, but it's not the way you did it. So I would just ask all of you to reflect on your own prejudice, because if this problem is going to be solved, ultimately, it's going to take more than demonstrations. It's going to take more than changing the education of the police force, which is all good things to do. it's going to take more than affirmative action. It's going to take more than changing laws, because we all know that this prejudice, no matter how we try to prevent it, fence it in, as long as it remains in the heart of people, it's going to come out, and it's going to be a problem. So Atoksija was talking about my book, Uplift Yourself, Change the World. And the theme of that book was based on years and years and years of experience in my own spiritual practice and years of experience in teaching others. And my experience was, it's so easy to know something and to not live it. But even, it's like you can sit in class and you're going to learn, and you're already learning. You've already learned, and we can talk more about this. I'm not the physical body. I'm a soul within the body. When I leave my body, it's just the soul leaves my body. You've probably all heard that in some form or another. We're not material beings having a spiritual. We're not spiritual beings. We're not material beings having a spiritual experience. We're spiritual beings having a material experience. That's been thrown around a lot, that quote. So we're consciousness. We're not physical, and so forth. And I learned that when I was 19, when I was in university. That was like my introduction to spiritual life was, you don't die, you're not the physical, you're the spiritual, it's eternal, it's blissful, and spiritual platform, there's no problem. And it made sense to me, right? So I understood it right away. It made so much sense. And when I came into that room, I thought I was a 19-year-old university student from Los Angeles with a certain name. Well, my name, Martin Hausner, and all the things related to the body. When I walked in, I thought that's who I was. I'm a student. I'm from Los Angeles. I'm a man. I'm 19. I'm Jewish. And then I heard that I'm not the body. And then I walked out of that room feeling as I felt before. I'm a 19-year-old young Jewish man from Los Angeles, university student, feeling that. But now understanding that I'm not that. And there's two completely different things, understanding and a feeling. So I can tell you you're not the body, okay? All the ladies out there, I'm going to tell you you're not the body. It doesn't mean you're not going to think you're a lady. It doesn't mean you're not going to be attracted to men. All the men, I'm going to tell you, you're not the body. It doesn't mean when you see a woman, you won't think she's a woman and I'm a man. Until you're on the self-realized platform, you're going to still identify with the body. So when I wrote this book, it was based on this realization that if we just hear and we don't start to imbibe what we're hearing, we don't change. At least we don't change much. But I had another realization in the process of writing and teaching, was even worse is when you think you have changed and you haven't. And we often think we've changed because we know, because we have knowledge. And it's sometimes hard to understand that I don't know something because my head knows it. So how do I know if I know? Well, there's a story in the book. No, I've written, not in that book. I'm writing another book. Well, I already wrote it. It's just, we have to publish it, work on the final part of it. And in that book, I told a story about a girl who was very eco-conscious. And when she would shop, she would bring her own containers made from paper or cardboard and buy everything in bulk. And when she saw people drinking out of plastic bottles, it really upset her, or eating out of anything plastic, or using plastic spoons. And she would think, now, how can you do that? That's so unconscious. Then one day, when she had opened a refrigerator, she saw inside a refrigerator, there were some plastic containers with food in them. And so she's like, where did these come from? Well, the fact is she put them in there. Interesting, right? And she'd opened up the refrigerator many times and she never saw them. And the reason she never saw them is because she thought she was completely eco-friendly. but she actually had done some non-eco-friendly things, obviously because she needed certain items that she couldn't get eco-friendly. But as she evolved in her identity as the ultimate eco-friendly young girl, it became more and more difficult for her to see right in front of her eyes that she wasn't. So I realized this is the real challenge for us to be able to see our own prejudice. And sometimes it's hard because we think, I'm not a prejudiced person. But as long as we identify ourselves to some degree with the body, there's going to be some prejudice. There's going to be some bodies we don't like. Oh, I don't like the big fat bodies, or I don't like the guys who drive the Rolls Royces. I think they're just materialistically, they're obnoxious people. They don't need those, whatever you're thinking. Not that you're thinking, but you have to see, what are you thinking? Are you thinking that way to any degree? And my ultimate point, my ultimate realization in writing that book was that although we should make efforts to make things better, the governments should do things to protect people. And I think everyone understands when you're reading and watching about what's going on in the world in the area of prejudice, I think it kind of something dawns on you. It's like, you can't legislate. You can't legislate this. Like, how is it that all of us are going to be equal to everyone? We're going to treat everyone with equal respect. Okay, you, as I said, you have to do something legislatively. You have to protect people. But ultimately, it's through education and beyond education, through practice and beyond practice, or in addition to practice, realization. And so in the Gita, there are many, many verses and other scriptures of the Vedas of India where it's saying that a self-realized person, he doesn't see people as their body. He sees them as a soul. And there's no difference between one soul, your soul, my soul. It's just the body's different, but the soul is the same. So sometimes the example is given as the body is like a car. I have an American car, you have a Scottish car, Raghunath has a Lithuanian car, and Adhokshaja has where's your car from? London? A London car?
I'm afraid my car is made in France.
Oh, you were born in France.
The
Or he's
Citroen.
driving a car, a Citroen. Where's your body car made?
Oh,
Body car's made in London?
Liverpool.
Liverpool. Oh. Liverpool, eh? You like the Beatles?
Brilliant.
So this is something that I think about a lot, and it concerns me a lot as a teacher and as a spiritual practitioner, that so many times when I see problems in the world, the first thought that comes is, you have to do something to change consciousness. The problem can't be solved fully on any other level. Politically, yes, you can do something, but until you work on the level of consciousness. And education is meant to change consciousness. Education, as we said, doesn't always do it. You can have a lot of spiritual knowledge, but it may not affect you. And I think that's a real problem. And all of you who are becoming interested in bhakti and spiritual knowledge, this is like a huge challenge to allow this knowledge to affect you. You know, like sometimes they say, you don't just read a book, but you allow the book to impact you. So you can read a book with no impact, or you can allow the book to impact you. So the spiritual knowledge may impact you, and it may not impact you. So when I was asked to give this talk, there was one thing that was bothering me. And it was this point that you could know, like I can teach you and say, well, the solution is for us to see everyone as spirit soul, to realize everyone is a spiritual being. And in theory, on paper, that is the solution. And in the Bhagavad Gita, it's explained that way. That's how elevated people see. Not only do they see equally humans, they see equally humans and animals and all forms of life. They don't they don't even kill insects. Because they see the soul equally. But from my own experience, personally and seeing others, those practicing spiritual life sometimes can be as guilty of prejudice as the people who aren't. And as you know, sometimes they can be more guilty. They can be worse. They can be more, oh, you're not of my religion, therefore you're of the devil. So then they become more prejudiced, isn't it? We were having class this morning, we were joking, you can try to get the award, the 2020 award for the most humble person on the planet. Yeah, I'm going to try to get that award. I'm going to work real hard. That kind of paradox, right? I want to be recognized as the most humble. So when you come to spiritual life, you get caught up in paradoxes, opposites. And then where you should see equally, a lot of people who come into a religion will say, I was more equal before I joined the religion. Now I think all these people are going to hell and I'm better. So these are things that we have to watch out for. The knowledge can backfire. And although we say everyone's equal, some people are more equal in our mind, and some people are less equal, right? Now, we have a problem. Well, we have many problems, but this is one problem in relation to this topic. I look at people and I see, well, actually, they're not equal. This guy can lift 200 kgs and I can't even lift 20. So our arms are not equal. This guy can run twice as fast as I can. This guy can work 10 times harder than I can. So, and this guy understands computers, programming, and I don't. So as we look around, we see we're not equal. Then how are we supposed to see everyone equal? So this is where we can't artificially see everyone equal on the material level because we're not. But it doesn't mean because you're smarter than me or I'm smarter than you, that you're better than me or I'm better than you. It just means we're endowed with different capabilities. So the conditioned nature of the human being is they want to feel themselves superior. They want to take advantage of their superior position. They want to overlord people who are inferior. That is the universal condition, the universal problem. And if we see somebody lesser or we think we're more or better based on just objectivity, I have a higher IQ. What's your IQ? Your IQ is only 118. Oh, mine's like 170. I'm better than you. Mine's not 170. I'm better than you. Or you can only do this. I can do much better. So how do we deal with that? Well, it's answered that with the same answer. We're not the physical body. So we are equal. It's just we have different size, shapes, and forms of vehicles. And so your little Mini Cooper and your Ferrari, they're different cars. They drive differently, right? So, but you, the driver, are the same. So that's how we balance these so-called distinctions. We can't say everything's equal because it's not. Some trees are taller, some are shorter. Now, another interesting thing. Well, let me go back a little bit because I don't know if I made this other point strong enough. That if this problem in the world of prejudice and the problem with the police and all this it's ever going to be solved, it has to start with us. We have to overcome our own prejudices. We have to recognize them, even if it's hard to admit it, because I think for a lot of us who are on the spiritual path, we don't think we're prejudiced. But we have to look at them. We just have, maybe you don't have to call it prejudice, but just look like what I did. I did my confession. I just had to admit, this is how I was conditioned. So whether I act on it or not is another thing. But the fact that it's programmed in there, I recognized it. And sometimes I could see it coming out because it was programmed there. And I can do whatever I want with that program. I can ignore it, I can erase it. But I think at least we have to recognize if it got in there, there's probably some residual effects of it that we still need to work on. So it's you and I, we're the ones who can really make the biggest difference. We can go out and protest and bring awareness to this issue, but You know, sometimes we had this ironic problem, like people who were protesting animal violence were wearing leather, something like that. Some, you know, like, wait a minute, why are you wearing leather shoes when you're protesting violence to animals? So it has to be a complete package. So we can protest the injustices of racism, but we have to remove that within our heart. And the more of us that remove it, the more it'll be removed in the world, because there is a mass consciousness. And so whatever is going on within us, it's going on in the world. I teach forgiveness, and one of the questions we ask is, do you want to see more forgiveness in the world? And everyone will say, of course. So then the next question is, are you putting out more forgiveness in the world, or are you putting out more resentment? And a lot of people will realize they have resentment. So actually they're putting out resentment into the world. And they didn't even realize that. I said, you realize, you know, say, you think it's justified that you're resentful, but you're putting more resentment into the world, and it's affecting the mass consciousness. So, you know, I may have valid reasons to be resentful, valid reasons to be prejudiced in my mind and my rationale. But the fact is, it's going out in the ether. And so to protest it, to be holistic, to protest it also means to live it internally. And, you know, we might assume that the people who are protesting are living it. And we hope they are, but I doubt if everyone is living it perfectly well. I'm sure some are and some aren't, because we're all conditioned by prejudice. And we are, as Gandhi said, be the change you want to see in the world. So this is important. So why don't I stop here? I mean, I could go further, but it's always nice to get your questions. And I said ask questions, and didn't even stop.
Yeah.
I didn't even stop for questions. So
okay, so Mary has a nice question. She's asking, is protesting an effective solution?
it's a partial solution, or it can be. But it's not the complete solution. I kind of see it like, let's say, Mary, you're not well, you have a bad diet, you don't exercise, you don't drink enough water, and then you go out and you start exercising, and then after you exercise, you still have your same diet. So if you ask me, you said, does exercise help? And I say, yeah, it helps, but it's not the complete solution. You need to drink more water, you need to get more rest, you need to take supplements, you need to eat better. So, but I would say, you know, if the result of protesting was to change the way people feel about other people, change the hearts of people, yeah. But, you know, we have to see. It's obviously bringing awareness to a problem, but changing hearts, it requires, changing hearts requires education, and ultimately it requires some form of spiritual practice. At least that's the way I see it. That, at least in my own life, through my daily spiritual practice, especially chanting every day, that has had the most profound effect on changing my heart and being more compassionate, kinder, removing prejudice, and so forth, than anything. And as I said, the knowledge helps, but the knowledge and education has to go deep. So there has to be some changing of the heart. So if the protests can help change people's hearts, yes. But I still experience, and the knowledge we get from Gita is the spiritual wisdom takes it to the deepest level, because on that level it teaches that we are equal spiritually. And it teaches that because of that we should respect not even human beings, we should respect all forms of life. You know, I was thinking when I was watching this protest in London, and I was thinking, or maybe I was watching in America, and I was thinking, I don't know if you're aware of this, but the American Indians, they're the indigenous people of America, they were massacred. Their land was taken. Their cattle were taken. The US Army fought them. I don't know if you know this. So it's like, if you're talking about Black Lives Matter, it's like, where does it end? You know, well, the black people were made slaves, Indian people were slaughtered. So when they were protesting, I was thinking, this is just opening Pandora's box to exploitation. And perhaps we're going to see other ethnic groups starting to come out and express how they've been exploited. You know, I could see if I were American born Indian, I would say, do you realize what you did to us? It's not just that the black people have it bad, but we also have it bad. So as I was watching that, it was just reminding me that the problem is systemic at the core of the heart, and that's where it has to be cured. Obvious. I think that's obvious, but that's maybe not. Maybe obvious is not always obvious. Yes.
I was just going to make a comment there. There does seem sometimes inconsistent that a person wants to show how much he loves somebody by how much he hates somebody else.
Oh yeah, very good. Yeah, that is the yeah. It's true. Yeah, that's unfortunate.
So there is a slightly different angle on this. John Reed is asking from Aberdeen. He's saying, all being equal, then does that not pave the way for any sex to become spiritual master?
All being equal, does it pave the way for letting man or woman become spiritual master?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, the scriptures say whoever knows the science of spirituality can become a spiritual master. There are different kinds of spiritual masters, but that's the basic qualification. So it can be a man, a woman, a child. Yeah, that there should be no bar against who can do it. Anyone who can do it. Even if it's a 5-year-old boy and he's enlightened, why not?
Yeah. Okay, we have a nice comment from Marco Mantovani. He says, spiritual realization is the only way to have equal vision. Otherwise, prejudice is present even in milder forms of social marginalization among kids and children. I believe that in schools, it is necessary to teach that we are the spirit soul and not the body. And the variety is a richness present also in the spiritual world. Equal vision is a gift from God and makes the difference in terms of human intelligence. Racism is such a lower stage of consciousness.
Well, I think it's a good point. If you're a parent or a parent to be, then be aware that whatever racism or prejudice may enter the heart of that young kid is going to have a very powerful effect. You know, with all the bullying and this and that, you know, where's that all coming from? Kids are impressionable. So, and as parents, we may be, or like my daughter was talking to me yesterday about racism. And in her generation, there's not the same amount of racism that existed in my generation because the cultures are more mixed. She has a lot of friends who are Afro. She has friends who, at least friends from everywhere. Every color and every shade in every country. Whereas my friends were all the same. So she said, you know, in your generation, there wasn't such awareness of this problem and you were more segregated. And it's true. It's very true. We were raised that way. So how you raise your children is important. And how you are is going to affect your children. And so as parents, you have a responsibility not only to educate your children materially, but spiritually as well.
So you made a very heavy point, but you made it in a really nice way so that it didn't seem like it was really heavy. Then when
you're going to make it heavy now, right?
But when you go around the corner, you could burst into tears and never be the same again. You said, am I contributing to the problem? So, May Riddle's making a nice point. She says the blame game is over. So maybe we get distracted trying to blame everybody else.
Yeah, that's there.
Ourselves, you know.
Well, I think it's an important realization to have in our progress that, you know, I'm the only one who's going to make the world better. If I'm expecting you to do it, then it just takes the responsibility off me. It's like, so you become better. Or it's like thinking, I already am better, so we need you to become better. But if you are better, then, you know, act better, show it, do something. But that's the way it's going to work. The way we think is the world becomes better when I become better, rather than the world becomes better. We think the world will be better when politicians are better. But you foresee politicians becoming better in the near future? You're going to hold your breath on it? I was, you know, my spiritual master would always say, he said that everything will change grassroots. And if people change, then they'll vote for different politicians. And I was, you know, I was just thinking about this yesterday. If you want to understand the consciousness of the people in your country, just look at who they vote for. Look at who they find to put up in office. That says a lot. These are the kind, but if people change, they're going to demand something higher in their leaders. So that's why I think the biggest change takes place within us, and then it manifests outside. And the more people that change, the better. We started a program called the Mantra Project, and it was just with the idea that if we get millions of people chanting, it's going to change consciousness. And that changing, my spiritual master said, the changing of consciousness can change the whole world. Because as we change consciousness, as we chant mantras, it affects the whole world. It affects the environment. So there's a lot of effect going on positively when we're chanting, or even having discussions like this. It's changing the atmosphere. And so the more you can change the atmosphere in your own internal environment, obviously it's going to come out, and you'll start affecting people around you more positively. And then things change. You know, I was raised during the hippie, I became a teenager during the hippie time, and there were a lot of ideals. And then it really, the hippie movement in America was really 1965 to 1970. Before 65, it was just sprouting, and after 70, maybe for a year or two, it was kind of dissolving. And then people were trying to find their place. And a lot of people were disillusioned because they had ideals for something better. But a lot of people were just falling back into materialism because the heart hadn't changed. So, you know, get your ideals in your head and your heart aligned, and you can be a powerful force. And you'll affect people. That's the way I see it. The world gets better when we get better, when I get better, when you get better. And when we get better, we'll vote for better leaders. We'll have better leaders. Otherwise, I mean, you know, and there's bad people, and it seems like the bad people end up running the show more often than the good people. And so that's something we don't want to tolerate. But as long as there's not enough enlightenment within individuals, that's what happens. And the system, you know, the system is established. It's hard to change the system. We had a candidate in America who was calling out all the dirty politics in her own party, and all the ways previous presidents had misunderstood international politics and used America kind of like a police force for the world and so on. And what she was saying was even appreciated by members of the opposing party because it was so true. And she never made it. And I realized the people don't want to hear the truth. They want to be lied to. That's the problem. So what she was saying, all she was saying is, this is just how it is, and I'm just telling you. It's not like I have some big platform. It's just, I don't want to continue with the status quo because it's destructive. And it was just so interesting to watch how the country was just not ready for that. It's like they want a president who lies to them. That was my conclusion. They want to be lied to. They want to pretend that things aren't the way they are. So as long as people are like that, unwilling to confront the truth and, you know, hide their own prejudice within their heart and pretend they're not, then we're going to have these problems. But at least we should change. That will be the beginning of a bigger solution in the long run.
May Riddle resonates that point. She says, maybe when we change, we won't demand anything anymore. Maybe we will seek to be of service.
Yes. Yes. You know, at least, I think one thing we can take away from this awareness now is at least I should not act in any prejudicial ways with other people. And I should become more aware of my prejudices. So maybe you need to be nicer to a certain race of people that you just avoided or you had negative thoughts towards, right? Just because they were different, not because you knew them, but you thought they were strange.
So you were making a point, Mahatma Prabhu. You were saying the educational system needs to be changed. We are products already of the educational system, so we have to kind of backtrack. We have to unlearn.
Yeah.
So many things. Eh?
Yeah, that was my point in examining your prejudices, and it's also, like you rightly point out, what did I learn? What did I learn wrong that's still affecting me? I met this one guy. He was a yogi. He was a very interesting guy. He only ate once a day, very austere. And he used to say, you are a product of your conditioning, your upbringing, social programming, etc. And now you've become what you are, but now you have to look at what you are and go back and say, is this what I want to continue to be? Or do I want to re-engineer myself? And I think for all of us, the answer is, yeah. We were raised in very materialistic societies. We got some good things from teachers, we got some good things from our parents, got some good things from our friends, and we got some bad things. And so take the good, reprogram the bad.
Some people could argue, well, I've looked at myself and I realize I'm not as good as I should be. And so that's great. So that's fine. I'm not going to do anything about it. I'm aware of it. So
why would you want to know? You know, now I found that I have a bullet in my kidney. Well, it's nice to know. You can do anything about it? No. Doesn't make sense. The whole point of introspection is to find out what you need to work on and work on it. Otherwise it's like, it's kind of like just, you know, philosophy. You're just talking philosophy and no action.
It does require a certain level of integrity and a certain level of sincerity to want to recognize it and to want to do something about it, though, isn't it?
Yeah, there's also responsibility. If you see a problem and you can do something about it, then you have a responsibility to do something. And if you don't, then you're guilty. Sin of omission. You could have done something. So, but I think everyone could do something. Just as we're saying, what do I do about prejudice? Don't be it. If you can't do anything more, just don't be prejudiced. You know, it's just, the thing is, it's pervasive. If you read about it, you just see it's pervasive in how people make decisions based on race, who they're going to hire, right? Who they, you know, immediately like or don't like based on race. You know, when you hear where this person's from, what goes off in your head.
Before I became a devotee, I studied advertising. So advertising is all about people being prejudiced about brands. So if you're not wearing the brand, then you're a non-entity or you're inferior. And if you have the product, so it's kind of it's bred into us, you know, so that we consume in a certain way.
Racial branding, I guess, right? You could call it. Yeah. It's pretty deep.
Yeah.
Even a lot of African Americans don't like African Americans because of all the programming. Yeah, it's there. Definitely. You want to hear something funny?
Yeah.
Might be a good way to end on a lighter tone. So I was in South Africa in 1981. That was during apartheid. And so they had neighborhoods for the Africans, the Black Africans. They had neighborhoods for the Indians. They had neighborhoods for the white people. There were a lot of Indians there, a lot of white people. And one of our spiritual masters, he's American, but he's African American. And he came there, and the custom is, if you're a disciple of a guru, or he's very exalted, you bow to him. And so I think this was the first time in South Africa they ever saw white people bowing to a black man. It was a big thing in South Africa in the media, white people bowing to a black man because he was their guru, and that was the culture. So that spiritual culture, it's not based on the body. It's based on it's based on the spiritual elevation of the people. So
is there any hope? Do you see signs of hope for the human race?
I think there's hope for everyone watching this broadcast. And I don't know if there's hope for everyone not watching it. There's hope. There is hope. There is hope. But I see the way the world's going, there's a lot of good people. And I think one important message I was going to say, and you just reminded me, that I think it was Martin Luther King or someone who said, he said that when you maybe know the quote better than I do, the worst thing that can happen is for good people to do nothing about the injustices and problems. So there's so many good people in the world. And so the good people have to become even better, more good, because there's a lot of bad people in the world. And as I said, unfortunately, a lot of those bad people seem to end up with a lot of power in their hands, and it's used against people. Even if their intentions are not bad, sometimes the consequences are bad, as we see it in the corporate world. Sometimes the intention is good, just to create a product, but the consequences of that product are maybe destructive for the environment or even individuals. Or in the process, they start becoming corrupt. And most companies do. They give up a lot of their ideals when they compete with other companies. So that means all you good people out there, you have to do good, do better. You can't be the ones who are prejudiced. You have knowledge. You know what to do, and you have to encourage the other good people to be good. Otherwise, the bad people will do their bad. That's what I have to say about that. Or as Forrest Gump said, that's all I have to say about that. That's all I have to say about that. Can you speak like that? Can you speak with an accent like that? You're an actor.
I got a forward.
You can speak like Forrest Gump.
Hey, yeah.
That's all I have to say about that.
Okay. Good. Yeah, so May finishes off with a nice comment. She says, it's a good day when we start to change. So I think it's inspiring to hear you talk, because you give us the inspiration to be able to implement, so that we can make it realer, because it's okay thinking these things and feeling these things, but let's put it into action and then
do something. Yeah. Don't just sit there, do something. Don't sit there and complain all day. Do something. That's what's needed. But do it inside. It's really the best thing you can do is overcome the prejudice yourself. This is the best contribution you can make to the world, and that's where it starts, and everything will come from that.
Could I just finish on one point, which I think would be very powerful to hear you expand upon this. You've made the statement in the past, if you can spot it, it means you've got it. So if you get really uptight about seeing people that are prejudiced, then what is that saying about you?
Yeah. Well, a lot of times what disturbs us is that we see in others a problem or a tendency that we have. Maybe we're not recognizing it, or but I mean, for someone to say I'm not prejudiced at all would not be true. But I think we all hate being prejudiced, which is why we hate seeing prejudice in others. So if we have some prejudice in ourselves, of course, you know, this is a kind of a trick question, because what you stated was a psychological reality, and a lot of injustices we see in society, because we're good people, we stand up against them, not because, you know, I stand up against rape and murder and child abuse, not because I'm a rapist or a killer or a child abuser. So we have to consider that also. So you know, you kind of have to balance both, right? Because good people do get hurt by injustice because they don't want to see other people suffer. So they have to keep that there, you know, both things in balance. Sometimes what you said is true, sometimes the other is true. The injustice in the world hits like that compassionate chord in our heart, and and we get upset. But I would say in either case, we should use that upset energy to do something positive. So if I'm upset by what I see in the world, can I go out and offer to be a better example and deal with people in a better way? Can that inspire me to do that? That's how we have to take it. Otherwise, it could degrade us. We could just be talking about how bad it is, and we get degraded by it. Yes?
Yeah, very good.
Okay. We're all over. We're finished today, everyone. It's your evening, and I have a whole day of papers to go through and catch up on. So
Okay. Thank you very much.
we'll see you all later.
Yeah.
Whenever later is. Maybe in person. Sooner or later, we'll get to see you in person also, right? Okay, I'll wait. I'll wait to come to Scotland until the sun is shining for days and days.
Did you know the joke about the Glaswegian who saw the sun? He thought it was a UFO.
I only know the other joke, Went Summer in London. It comes on August 26th. Yeah, I know that one.
One day, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You. Thank you.
See you.